Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Burkinabé authorities say they're looking into a massacre committed over the weekend. At least 28 bodies were found in the region of Nouna. Burkinabé rights group accuses VDP civilian auxiliary forces of being behind the bloodshed. Also, in Rutshuru, DR Congolese families have been fleeing clashes between M23 rebels and soldiers. The International Committee of the Red Cross sets up phone booths to help the displaced track down the missing and those left behind in combat zones. And a Grammy award-winning Kenyan musician creates a one-stop online shop for artists to make it easier to get exposure and track their income. Biame Alusa's Hustles as online platform has been going for a little over a year now and has already brought together a keen community. We take a closer look. But first, Burkina Faso has launched an investigation after 28 bodies were found in the country's northwest over the weekend. The government says that it's looking into reports of what it's called an incident in the commune of Nouna on the night of December 30th going into the 31st. Now, the country's been grappling with a jihadist insurgency that's cost tens of thousands of lives and sparked 2 coups last year alone. Well, Sam Mednick covers the West African region and joins us now with more. Sam, first of all, what more can you tell us about these 28 victims and the circumstances in which they were found?
So what we know is that the government is investigating the deaths of 28 civilians in Nouna in the west of the country. Now, this was largely an ethnic Fulani village, and a rights group has come out and said that it was in fact volunteer militia groups, so these are volunteer fighters, civilians who fight alongside the army, that they are the ones responsible for the killings. They said that it was retaliatory attacks, that jihadists had attacked their headquarters a day earlier, and that Fulani are believed, there's a perception that they fight with the jihadists, and so that this was an attack in retaliation for that. Children were killed in this attack, and the rights group has said that these attacks targeting the ethnic Fulani have increased as the security situation has gotten worse in the country, and specifically since the second coup leader came to power in September.
Now, these civilian groups, they're called a VDP, and some find them particularly controversial. The fact that they exist at all is controversial. Why is that?
There was concern when the government decided to have these volunteer fighters 3 years ago now, that it was going to be controversial, that it was going to exacerbate tensions within communities, and that if you gave a lot of people arms, more people arms in the country with very little training, specifically without human rights training, that it was going to cause human rights atrocities. And in some parts of the country, specifically the Sahel and in the east, that's exactly what's happened. I've spoken to civilians in the east and in the Sahel who said that they have become equally afraid of the volunteer fighters as they are against the jihadists. And the volunteer fighters themselves have also become attacked by the jihadists who really don't like them, and they've also become perpetrators. So it's a very controversial and very tense situation, specifically in some parts of the country.
Now, the tension's pretty much across the board. Now, the toll that the insurgency has had on civilians and security forces was what, in fact, in part led to the 2 coups that the country saw last year. But since then, it seems that Burkina Faso has become even more unstable socially, diplomatically, in terms of security. What's your take on what's behind the deepening of this across-the-board friction?
This is a country that never really saw war before. And in the last 7 years, particularly in the last 3 years, it's descended into a dire situation. People are becoming increasingly frustrated, so much so that, yes, there were 2 coups last year. And the government is really, really struggling to stem the crisis. And with each shift, with each coup, there becomes further distrust. Right now, there's a lot of distrust within the military, between ranks, with age, within sectors, the gendarme, the police, the army. And this continues to grow. There's also that the junta is looking more towards, it's away from the partners it's worked with in the past, such as France, and it's looking more overtly towards partners like Russia. There's much more anti-French, anti-Western sentiment in the country right now. Recently, the junta asked the French ambassador to leave the country. A few weeks ago, it expelled the chief of the United Nations. It also kicked out 2 French people that it accused of spying, and it has suspended RFE as well. So as the security continues to get worse, people become more frustrated. The military junta is trying to stem the problem, but as things get worse, people are concerned that these frictions are just going to continue deepening.
Thank you so much, Sam Mednick there for us, speaking to us about deepening tensions in Burkina Faso after 28 bodies are found in the country's northwest. Now, on Tuesday, a Senegalese court ruled to keep a prominent journalist in prison despite his worsening health. Papa Alé Niang has been on hunger strike for 2 weeks since he was sent back to prison on December 20th. The government critic was first arrested in early December on widely criticised charges of spreading fake news, publishing confidential documents and threatening national security. Many in Senegal see Mr. Niang's continued detention as evidence of the government's crackdown on civil liberties. Our Sam Bradpiece brings us more from Dakar.
Pape Alé Niang is an investigative journalist and head of the popular news website Dakar Matin. He was arrested in November after publishing documents related to a court case of an opposition figurehead here in Senegal, Ousmane Sonko. He was briefly released before being re-arrested in December, and he's since been on hunger strike, framing his struggle as one for the freedom of the press here in Senegal. And it's true that many fellow Senegalese journalists have been speaking out in support of him. Today, though, a court denied his request for release from prison. This whole saga has cast the Senegalese government in a bit of a bad light. Even allies of the President Macky Sall have confided in me that the arrest of Pape Alé Niang is not a good look. Mr. Niang's lawyers are going to continue to push for his release, and there have been calls for a protest on Saturday in his support.
Sam Bradpiece there for us. Now, some Chagos Islander lobbyists and descendants of former inhabitants of the archipelago say that they've not been consulted as Britain and Mauritius begin new talks about the disputed sovereignty of the territory. In 1965, a few years before Mauritius gained independence from the UK, the Chagos Islands were separated from the rest of the country so that Britain could lease an island to the US military. 2,000 Chagosians were deported. Mauritius has since fought for the return of the archipelago, and despite rulings in its favour from the International Court of Justice and a vote from the UN General Assembly, Britain has continued to insist the islands belong to it. And Tanzania's president has lifted a 6-year ban on opposition rallies. It had first been introduced by political strongman John Magufuli, and its removal has been welcomed by the main opposition party and rights campaigners. Magufuli died in 2021, and his term is being served out by President Samia Suluhu Hassan. Communities in eastern DR Congo say that a withdrawal recently announced by M23 rebels terrorising their communities has not been effective. Over the last week, clashes have been reported between the militia and the Congolese army. In Rutshuru, families have been fleeing the violence. In the chaos, loved ones often lose contact with each other. The International Committee of the Red Cross has set up special phone booths to help the displaced try to track down those left behind in combat zones. Our correspondent sent us this report.
Mathilde Nyabazande arrived alone at the Kanyaruchinya camp after fleeing fighting between the Congolese army and the M23 group. After 4 weeks with no news from her family, she finally reached her daughter.
Do you hear me? Are you in good health? I was very worried because the situation is not good. She told me that everything was fine and that she was looking to come here to the camp with my grandchildren.
Many displaced people from the Rutshuru territory have lost contact with relatives. This phone booth was set up to allow them to keep in touch. That day, many people wanted to call.
We note all calls on a comment form. In 3 hours, we already registered 80 free calls. We generally reach 120 calls per day.
Many times, a piece of paper with hastily written numbers holds people's only hope to reach a relative. This young woman was unlucky.
My brother-in-law does not answer. I have no news from my sister nor from her children. The fighting continues in Rutshuru territory. I'm very worried.
5 similar telephone booths have been set up in camps in North Kivu. priority is given to children who fled the fighting on their own. It's almost impossible for them to reunite with their parents as long as the fighting continues.
On essaye justement à travers aussi le téléphone.
We try through the phone and the volunteers we have in different places to reunite these families.
Les activités de rétablissement des liens familiaux.
Since October, more than 500,000 people have fled Rutshuru territory, according to the UN. All live in camps in difficult conditions.
A Grammy award-winning Kenyan musician has created a one-stop shop for artists to share their work and track and make money. Biame Alusa's Hustle Sasa online platform has been going for a little over a year now and has already brought together a keen community. Caroline Lambale tells us more.
One app that does it all. Artists and creatives using Hustle Sasa can stream their music, but also sell branded merchandise, concert tickets, and other services. Kenyan musician Biame Alusa says it's filling a gap left by other platforms.
It takes a while on those platforms to build because even how they're billing it is disadvantaged to East Africa. Our region has one of the lowest payout rates in the world from other streaming platforms. But on Hustle Sasa, you're getting value for money in real time. You can't go and withdraw your YouTube cash immediately at your own leisure.
Kenyan musician Yaba says the app's streaming service has allowed him to make more money faster.
The musician who is fighting his way to the top when it comes to streaming, it's not like the other platforms do not make musicians money. It's only that you need numbers, and numbers take time.
The app isn't just for musicians. It's also being used by creatives in several fields. The owner of the shop in Nairobi says it's helped her to expand her business online. Customers place orders via the platform, and within minutes, the sale goes through. The founders are hoping Hustle Sasa will grow and reach other countries. They're now in talks to develop operations abroad in Ghana and in South Africa.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.